Hello and welcome back to Ask Dan Anything. I'm Dan Munro, confidence coach and co-founder of Brojo, and today we're answering a question sent in from one of the members. Now I'm going to read out the whole question, but in essence what we're talking about is somebody who talks up a big game and doesn't follow through, and how frustrating that is to deal with, and why is that frustrating to deal with, and what are we to do about these people. So he says, I have a relative. Every time I meet him, he talks about a business that he's interested in starting. For instance, one day he's opening a small tire repair shop. The next day, it's a video game rental, on and on. I hear his plans. I feel some empathy for him, but I see that it's not really true. He's not following through. He's not opening any of these businesses. And sometimes this type of conversation really makes me sick. What can I do in the way of my way of thinking about this type of situation? So first and foremost, you've got to acknowledge we've all got that in our lives. Somewhere in your life is someone who frustrates you because they talk a big game and they just don't follow through. They're the same kind of person to break promises, to be flaky on arrangements. They've got this they seem satisfied with just talking about something, and they seem to be unaware of their lack of engagement, their lack of action, and lack of follow through. The good thing about you, the guy who's asked this question, is you've identified the real problem is in your reaction, not in his action. You are not being objectively harmed, you are being subjectively harmed by your own beliefs, by your own emotions, by your own reaction. And this is the key point I want to make first off about this video that applies to everybody. Quite often you'll be in pain and you think someone caused you pain, and so you're looking to them. This person did something, that's what needs to change. But pain is mostly subjective. You know, if 100 people were exposed to this guy, they would all react differently. And some wouldn't be harmed at all. I personally wouldn't. But I used to be harmed by people like this. Now, if I went around stabbing people in the face, I could do that to 100 people, they would all be harmed. That's objectively harmful to do. Okay? Or if I was psychologically abusive to 100 people, most of them would be harmed. Only the very confident would be unaffected. So we can say that's almost objectively harmful. But someone breaking promises and not following through on what they do, that might only harm 50% of the people in the queue. So it's very subjective. It depends who you're doing it to as to how much harm there is. So it's great that you've identified that this isn't really about him. This is about your reaction to people like him and to situations like this. So the first question you've got to ask yourself is, why? Why does this bother me? In fact, you're asking this question to me, I think. But ask yourself, there are other things people do, and I'm okay with it, that other people again think are bad. And yet this one, some people are okay with guys being like this, but I'm not. Why? Why me? Why does someone being indecisive, flaky, predictably unreliable, why does that bother you? The first, you've got to look at your physical reaction when he acts like this. Do you react honestly? Because I like to read between the lines when people send me through questions, and what I'm hearing is you're not confronting him on his unreliability. You know, you're putting up with him making these promises and not delivering, knowing that he's not going to follow through. You've seen the pattern. You've seen his history. He has evidence showing that he cannot be trusted. And I think what's really bothering you is you're not calling this out. Okay. So most of the time, one of the reasons that somebody repeatedly bothers us is because we're not confrontational. What really bothers us is that we're not confrontational. We allow people to sort of intrude in our world. There's a thing I call passive condoning, which is if you don't confront against something wrong, you're basically giving it a thumbs up. You know, to do nothing about something is to approve of it. You know, if you stand by and watch that bystander effect and let someone do harmful behavior, you might not think you approve of it, but your behavior does. You're allowing it to occur. And that's what can make you lose sleep at night. You know, I remember there's been a few times in my past where something bad was happening to someone in a public place and I didn't want to get embarrassed by getting involved, and yet that night I couldn't sleep. I thought, well, on one hand, I'm clearly opposed to what I saw, but I also clearly didn't do anything about it. And that's what really gets to me. It's not so much the behavior. It might have been just a bit of bullying or some nasty words being said. Now, that doesn't hurt me that much. What hurts me is me standing by watching it. So do you share your thoughts and feelings honestly, brutally honestly, with this guy when he's making yet another one of his grand claims? Probably not. In that case, I would say start there. You might find that being honest will relieve the sense of frustration you have with this situation. You only need to do it once, and then he knows it, you knows it, boundaries have been set, you can leave him alone. After that, you've told him, and that will have a big impact on you. There's a deeper reason that this could bother you, as he may be playing the role of a mirror, showing you either your own inadequacies or fears about potential inadequacies. Does he remind you of yourself in some way that hurts, or does he represent a version of yourself that you hope doesn't exist? Is his flakiness something you also see in yourself, perhaps in another area? You might not be promising to start a business, but perhaps you've been promising to do something more courageous socially and you haven't been following through. Maybe you've been trying to work on your career, but you haven't taken that risk. Are you making promises you're not keeping? Maybe just to yourself. And he reminds you of that. He reminds you of what that looks like, and how sort of disgusting you find that behavior, and the kind of self-worth issues that it causes you to behave like this. Or do you just see, this is a big one with people getting really upset by criminal offenders. They may not themselves be criminal offenders, but they see what humans are capable of, and that deeply bothers them because they know, if another human could do it, maybe I could. People find this really bothersome about working with murderers and sexual offenders. They want to see them as something different to human, something alien, because they don't want to acknowledge they have that darkness in themselves. They may never act on it, they may never even want to act on it. But if it's in another human, it must be in us too. So sometimes it can just bother you because you're just seeing the weakness of human beings. And you're part of that species. It's like being embarrassed by your own species. I get that sometimes. It's one of the reasons I try to avoid scrolling through Facebook. It just embarrasses me. I'm like, if aliens are watching us, I'm not going to be able to explain this, I'm going to feel awful if they're like, hey, why is that guy whinging on Facebook? I'll be like, look, dude, I'm sorry. We just do this. I don't know what to tell you. It's awful. Overall, when someone else's behavior irks you, but it's not objectively harmful, then it's your judgments that hurt you. It's the story you add to their behavior. What is that story? Why are you adding it? And why does it hurt you? Those are the questions only you can answer. See, even in extreme cases, I think of ISIS and terrorist organizations. What really bothers me about them is not just that their behavior is wrong by my sense of morals, but they show the chaos that humans are capable of, the uncertainty, the death, the absolute fucking mental lunacy that any human, a lot of those ISIS guys are regular kids that just got kind of corrupted, which means I could maybe get corrupted, or maybe my children one day could get corrupt. There's a lot of risk about being a human, and that reminds me of the risk. So I have to face that fear. This is about acceptance. I have to learn to be okay with just how fucked up humans can be, and learn to learn from it, to not be like ISIS, to not be the guy who promises and doesn't deliver, to not be those things that bother me, to take them as reminders of what I need to be, what my values are. If you like that, subscribe. There'll be a Brojo logo floating around here. Send your questions through either dan@brojo.co.nz, or if you want them answered quickly and in depth, become one of our $1 members. It's only $1 a month, and it helps support us to do this kind of work. And I'll see you all next time. Cheers.